welcome to another edition of the Wrap-Up live from Victoria, where me and Adon just got out of Raptors day 2 of Raptors training camp practices, and we're here to talk about it, and we're also here to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments, and we'll try to get them at the end of the episode.
I can feel your energy going like slowly ramping up.
I am trying. I'm a little bit stuffy, hence the sound, but I'm fighting. I'm a fighter, so.
Yeah, today we got to talk to Nick Nurse again, Freddie Van Vliet, Chris Boucher, and Precious Achiuwa. What were some of your first impressions with how it went? It felt shorter. It felt really brief.
Yeah, I think each of them were a bit shorter than yesterday. And we didn't get to see a whole lot on the court, unfortunately, today, which would have been nice to see some more of that stuff. But impressions, I don't know. I think Boucher is a good quote. I think Precious is a good quote.
Precious is a great quote.
Yeah. Fred is obviously a really good quote.
Fred's great. He's just very serious. Precious, he plays to the crowd. He's got that smirk.
Yeah.
He's giggly. He came on and asked the cameras if he looks good, which is small potatoes, but compared to other guys who just walk on with this, or other guys, the people I've experienced thus far, he's a lot less serious.
Yeah. And he said at the end, he was like, "That's it. That was so quick."
Yeah, he wanted more.
That's
probably, I guess, over the years you kind of
get sick of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to kind of talk about the starting lineup question because I thought that was maybe the most interesting part of the presser, just in terms of I think everyone was waiting for someone to ask Nick about who he was going to start this season. And I also thought that his answer was probably going to be we're going to start the same 5 and see how it goes.
Dun, dun, dun.
But this was Nick's answer, and he looked around like he always does when he get asked a question that he doesn't like.
Yeah, I was saying to Oren on the drive back, he's this snarky pirate. He kind of squints in one eye and looks around at everybody this asshole's asking this question kind of thing.
Yeah. Anyways, he said, "No, you know what my thoughts are. I think there are a lot of guys that could start. I think we spent a lot of time talking about it. I think the health situation dictates a lot of it that none of us can control, right? I think it changes on its own and evolves, and I think we have a lot of guys ready to start. I feel like that's just, again, the modern NBA. There's more than 5 guys that could start a game."
So PR rhetoric doctor, what's your diagnosis on that kind of vague statement?
Yeah, it is. I kind of thought he'd learned his lesson when it comes to evolving starting lineups, because he came in with this thing where it was I'm gonna evolve. One day it'll be Serge, one day it'll be Mark, and then that always towards the end of the season just became Mark in that he always went in with a really evolve loose. I'm a loose chill guy.
It depends on the matchups.
Yeah, and then he always settled on 5. So I thought he learned from that and was going to be more of we're going to find our starting 5. And yeah, I thought he was going to say we're going to start with the same 5 and see if it works or whatever. This question was in relation to Precious. It was could you see Precious being in that starting lineup? And he definitely didn't say no, so I'm encouraged.
That's what you could take away, is what wasn't said. And shout out to Eric Kareem for asking, because we were also saying it takes a little bit of gusto to ask that question, because it's I feel that's probably the one everyone wants to know and the one that they don't want to necessarily answer. But yeah, like you said, they could have Nick Nurse, a stock answer. Basically, what you have to read into is why wasn't the stock answer chosen? And I guess the stock answer would have been, we're going to run it back like we did last year, and then we'll play it from there and see what's going on. But he left that open-ended, which kind of, begs the question of what that open-endedness could look like. And I think you're right. It's probably going to be Precious because of the way he played towards the end of the year and in the playoff series, even though I don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah, let's talk about like potential dark horse starters. But before we talk about that, I just want to say like he kind of maybe this is just PR because he has to kind of say that in order to keep guys motivated. Because if he just says we're gonna have the same starters, then guys aren't really motivated to try to get into that starting
That's true.
lineup. So he's keeping it open ended, and maybe it's nothing more than talk and like that's all it is. Maybe it's meaningful. We'll see, I guess, in the preseason. But yeah, who would be? I mean, I feel like you do want Precious to start.
I don't.
You don't. Who do you want to start?
Well, we talked about this yesterday a little bit. Like I want Thad.
You
I want Thad, or I want nominal Birch minutes.
Wow, big Birch guy over here.
No, I'm not. I think Birch is probably going to be buried. Although I was watching him on the side hoop and he was killing both right hand, left hand 6-foot floaters, just killing them. So
He's
it's good.
Ambidextrous.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah.
So good for him for working on it, and that's where he's going to succeed if he does get playing time. But I've just, like I said, I think this is less about matchups and more about touch distribution. And
Right.
and like if we want guys like OG, well, first of all, we want Pascal and Freddie to be the dominant like touch guys. Then Scotty and OG in that like second tier. And for them to do that, the fifth guy needs to not be a guy who wants touches himself, i.e. Gary or Precious. So if you bring in Thad, who said in the presser yesterday, I'll just do what I got to do for the team. I'm chill playing 12 minutes. Like I'll fill whatever role is needed.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that kind of attitude is what we want in the fifth spot. And then let Precious and Gary do their thing in coming off the bench with Boucher, the three of them.
I think that makes sense offensively, but defensively, I don't really think Thad is the guy you want in there because you're going to have to guard a lot of big centers, and Thad can't really do that on his own. And I also don't think he's the best guy when it comes to like the one thing that the starting five does have with them is like a lot of quickness. And so they're theoretically like well suited to double guys and then go run out to the perimeter and kind of defend that way. And I think if you put Thad in there, that's just like a slow body to play that kind of style.
Why can't he guard bigs? Other than the pick and roll, like why can't he?
Well, he can't guard like Embiid as well as Precious can, I don't think.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah. I guess like the thing also is starting all that relevant. And like the thing is that you see a lot of guys in the league who start, but it's a nominal amount of minutes. JaVale McGee is going to start. Like but that is because and like, you know, ask Christian Wood, he's not so happy about it. But the same kind of concept applies to Precious, where it's like you want a guy who can gobble up touches on his own in Christian Wood. You let McGee play those 5-6 minutes, sweat it out with the big tussle around, and then sit him, and he's probably going to do the same thing in the second half, and then that's it. And I think you could do the same thing with Cam or Thad.
Yeah. I mean,
starter. Like I've seen KM talking about starter minutes. Starting does not mean starter minutes. Like especially if we're going to be rolling 9 to 10 deep, right? Like you could have multiple subs coming in and out. You probably will.
Yeah. Should we move on?
You have nothing else to say?
On the starting thing?
I've convinced you.
No. Oh yeah, I do have something else to say. Yeah, no, I guess I'm team start Precious. One is just like in the short term, I like the idea of having a big out there who can. I think he allows you to play a style that's a little less hectic and tiresome over the course of a game because theoretically, you know, he might not be great at it, but he's probably better at it than most guys. It's like he can play some drop defense, not always play such a erratic style of defense to start games and kind of work your way there as the game goes on. And I think Precious would be one of the best options when it comes to just doing that and also not requiring as many double teams in the post against bigs just because he's so strong. So I guess in the short term, I just think I'd like to get it big in there and get Gary to kind of come firing off the bench. And especially if he's going to hit threes, I'm not as worried about the spacing.
Precious?
Yeah, which is a big question, but
I mean, Dad can hit those threes, baby.
Sure.
But one thing though is like I don't think that's the optimum lineup, just to be clear with that. I agree with you in that sense. Like, I think closing with Precious is going to be the way defensively all day.
And I'm okay with limiting Precious's role on offense when it comes to like all you're gonna do is hit pick and pop threes or you're gonna roll to the rim. Like we're not gonna feed you. Like
Yeah, he doesn't want to do that.
he doesn't want to do what?
He doesn't want to be pick and pop rim guy.
Yeah, but he's in his second year. Like he doesn't deserve to get. Yeah, but with the Raptors, like he doesn't deserve to get like the OG ball touches.
I agree, but from the bench he would, right? Because it's like
but I don't want him to. I don't want him.
Why not?
Because I'm okay with putting him in a small role, get him to actually get good at catching the ball on the roll and finishing at the rim. And then you can only expand your game once you're good at already doing those things.
Well, I guess, and we talked about this too, like the give and take of development versus winning. And I think putting Precious in a position where he's probably not as comfortable as just being a pick and pop rim roller, but having to create a little bit off the bench kind of like balances the two, where you're allowing him to explore his game while also like limiting the consequences of that if it goes awry.
Yeah. I guess my main reason though for Precious starting is a more long-term outlook. And it's like the same reason we started Barnes last year. Like there was a lot of times where Barnes got cooked on the perimeter and whatever. But you look at Barnes and you say he's the future. You need to get him high leverage minutes against starters. And that's going to pay off in the playoffs. And I feel similarly about Precious. Like I want him getting high leverage minutes against the best centers in the league. Because as we saw against Philadelphia, I think he is the best suited guy on this team to guard those centers. He did a pretty good job against Embiid, all things considered. And I think if there's no changes made to this team and we do match up against Embiid or Giannis, Precious is the guy who has to take those matchups. And so I just want to get him the most minutes against starting caliber, like defensively more than anything. Because I just think it'll pay off in the future.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And also with having Scotty in the starting lineup, I feel like there's a lot of overlap between him and Precious. Anyway, I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Okay. Let's talk about Chris Boucher's quote. We'll move on to another quote from today. Boucher was asked about Pascal. Was this my question?
Yes.
Okay, I asked him about Pascal. I was more so wondering, like, as a leader, what he's kind of how he's kind of changed in the offseason, because they spent so much time at Rico Hines runs together, and that's really like Pascal's thing. So I was curious about that. But he kind of talked more on the court about Pascal, and he basically said he sees Pascal being similar to the way he played in the finals when he could score
with Kawhi.
With Kawhi, he said when Pascal was scoring anything, anywhere, that's how I see him right now. Obviously, he's more mature, he's older and all that. He can score from anywhere. His confidence is there, his swagger is there. So it really looks good. Obviously, he's working hard this summer. And then the main thing he said was that I think he got all the tools to be in the MVP conversation.
Let's go.
Let's go.
What's did someone, I think, S tweeted the odds? It's like 25,001 or something? Something like that?
I'd put $1 on that.
Yeah, why not?
No, it can't be that much, but
I'll look it up.
But yeah, Pascal, MVP, dark horse. What do you think?
I think the makings are there.
Yeah, there's a world.
There is a world. But I don't think Toronto's gonna, like, the thing is to win the MVP the way Jokic did, which is have like a team who's like upper middle of the pack. Like, let's assume Toronto's a 5 to 7 seed, right? Mm. For someone to win MVP at that level, he'd have to be averaging like 28, 10, and 10. And I don't know.
He's not doing that.
I don't know that he's that much of a playmaker to be like at that level.
You know what? He actually might be in terms of a playmaker if they put the ball in his hand that much, but they're not going to put the ball in his hand that much. And also his teammates, unless the shooting dramatically improves, his teammates just aren't hitting enough of the shots he's giving them to average 10 assists.
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's the world. I think the world is that the Raptors are a surprise 2 seed. And he's the obvious best player.
Yeah, but I think if they're a surprise 2 seed, that's because 3 or 4 guys are breaking out all at the same time. In which case, that might like limit, like kind of like a Phoenix situation.
Yeah, maybe it's that like they're a surprise 2 seed, and it's similar to last season where him and Fred are just carrying them a lot of the year. But you're right. I think you're right, but I don't think that necessarily negates his chances because, like, the guys who would break out are not like all stars or anything. They're not like known around the league. Yeah, but it's like if Precious has
Freddie
a really good
all-star.
year, yeah, but he's not a breakout guy. I just think like the depth is still ultimately depth, and like if it's similar to the way last season operated, where Pascal was so clearly the best player and the guy with the most touches, there's a world he's a top 5 MVP guy if he puts up 25, 7, and 7.
If he's top 5, that means it's Giannis, Durant, Curry, Jokic, Embiid, and you're assuming
Luka. Yeah, there's a lot of good guys.
Kawhi, if he comes in. Like I just don't think he's ever going to reach that level. I like, it's not to say he can't, but he hasn't demonstrated that he is that much of a vortex. Like he's that much of a problem at the offensive end. He's really, really good. Don't get me wrong, but it'd be hard for me. It'd be hard to imagine him talking about him in the same way we talk about Luka.
I agree, honestly. I don't see him becoming that. Because if he's a top 5 player, then the Raptors are a legitimate championship.
Mm-hmm.
So he's obviously a long ways away from that, or else they would be closer to championship contenders right now.
And we've already seen in the media that they're not talking about them like they're a championship team.
Yeah.
Like Nurse said that. I think Masai said that.
Yeah, like Masai was like, I don't think they're a championship team this season.
Yeah, which like that'd be a classic underplay if you, but you know, I wouldn't put it past Masai for some subterfuge. But yeah, I just I mean, I like that they're talking about him in that way because again, like we established that Pascal was the guy last year, but now it's like it's set in stone, which is kind of nice going into the season. Like we know everybody's behind Pascal being the guy, and then it just kind of tears out from there. And I think that's like important to have for the
hierarchy.
Yeah, and like the composition of the team and how things operate, and like, you know, when Kyle was there, you looked to Kyle to settle things or like to get a bucket when you needed to. Not to say he was the best player on the team, but like you knew that's what he was there for. And we didn't have that initially last year until like Pascal really asserted himself. And now we know going into this year that that's what it's going to be about. And I think to me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And then the other thing that just reminded me of that I wanted to talk about is like, do you think this team is better built around Pascal than it ever has been? Because this is kind of his 3rd year of being the number 1 option. Is it his 4th?
No, this is his.
No, because the year after they won a championship and Kawhi left, he was the number 1 option. But barely. Like, there was a lot of guys who could score.
Yeah, I think it was maybe Kyle. By a minority majority kind of thing. Yeah,
that's why I barely count that year. I barely count the Tampa year for obvious reasons. So really, like his second real year.
Second year, yeah. I would call it his first legitimate year because last year he was injured, and it was like this is Freddie and Pascal's team, and it still is in like the sense of leadership, but this is Pascal's team.
Yeah, so I guess, do you think it's better built around his strengths and weaknesses to negate the weaknesses and improve like the strengths? Like, is this team well built around Pascal as a number 1?
I actually don't think so.
Why?
Because to me, the problem is, and it's a good problem, is that you have Scotty and you have, I think OG is a really good guy. Like, I think OG and Freddie pair quite well with him. But having like guys like Scotty and Precious who are well, especially Scotty, I don't think necessarily works. Like optimally, I would say, like I don't think Scotty's the best guy to put around Pascal necessarily, mostly because he can't shoot. He's not as much as like I guess I don't know. It's hard to say now. I'm trying to think about what would be the ideal system around Pascal.
Exactly. It's like on one hand, I do think this is the best it's ever been built around Pascal, at least in the past 3 years. Like there's no doubt about that.
That's
So they are putting things in place. But that's the interesting thing. Okay, I think like spacing is obvious. You need to put spacing around Pascal because he's just such an interior presence and such a good passer that, as we saw in the Philadelphia series, if guys like Precious and Scotty were not being guarded on the perimeter, and so the paint was really tight for Pascal. So spacing has to be a priority. The reason I do like the Barnes fit, like they worked really well together.
They did.
Is because they're both really good interior passers, and those are the best buckets are the ones you can get at the rim. And those two guys like just found ways of finding each other under the basket in tight spaces. But at the same time, you're right. Like I don't know if you can play all three of them at the same time with Precious also in there and have a great half court offense.
I think that's the problem is like I don't look at any of the other four guys yet, and they're like a legitimate half court threat. And if Scotty does become more of that over the course of this year, then it will make more sense. But
yeah, that's why it's interesting to me that the Raptors have doubled down on like playmaking and size. They don't go and sign shooters for the most part. Otto is an exception, a welcomed one. Otto.
Where does Pascal? Like, what team would you drop Pascal in right now, and he would be like in an ideal fit?
Yeah, I guess like I'll think about just like what he needs beside him. He needs a 5 who can protect the rim, because as good of a secondary rim protection he is, he's not the guy who's going to defend Embiid.
Yeah.
Or defend the pick and roll really at a high level. So I think you need like a big burly center. And that center doesn't necessarily need to shoot threes, but they do have to be like a smart offensive.
Don't say Miles Turner.
Player. No. No, I'm thinking like
I think
what's funny is I've always thought about Philadelphia and like the fit between Embiid and him would be like a seamless fit.
But the problem, like the thing is, everybody would be a seamless fit with Embiid. I feel like for the most part.
Right. I guess it's just like Philly's always been looking for that power forward.
Right.
And I've always thought like Pascal would be amazing there.
This is really getting off topic, but I kind of like him in Washington.
Washington sucks.
Him and Beal and Porzingis would be a pretty cool 3.
It's just like Washington's so far away from contention. I'm not thinking about those types of teams.
Well, put Pascal on the team, maybe there.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe we should.
No, but yeah, like no, I don't know though. What is the best way to build around him is like a fascinating.
No, I think you're right. I think like a guard who can create on their own, and then a bunch of shooting and a rebounding big. If you're gonna go more traditional. A versatile rebounding big.
Yeah, that's why I think like Precious's development is so important, is because like he needs to find better ways to be useful in a half court offense with Pascal, especially when he's not hitting threes. Like, what is he doing in that offense? Last season, not good things, but like could make a big difference if he's doing good things, because the defense we know is like a great fit. You know, that's another thing, is switchable guy, like a switchable 5 who you can now switch that pick and roll. I really like that fit too. Luka and Pascal, we are hearing in the comments. Okay.
The people have been asking about Koloko. We didn't get to see much of him. I saw him shooting around on a side basket.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about Koloko on other episodes though. Like,
well,
I'm not expecting him to play.
No, but just like, did you like any thoughts on it? Like, do you see anything in training camp? And we didn't. And I don't think he's going to play much.
Yeah, like he feels like a guy who's starting the year in the 905, and if he surpasses expectations there, he could definitely play at some point in the year if there's injuries or anything like that. If they trade Kem, like Kem is a contract I definitely see being traded, and then you want another backup big.
That's what I was going to say is, like, as long as Kem's there, I don't think Koloko's necessarily going to get the minutes over him.
Yeah.
Just because you've paid Birch, you kind of have to play him.
And Birch is like significantly better at this
Yeah.
point in his career.
Well, I think we undersell, like, Birch really disappointed last year, but I think, like, there was a point in time where Birch was like a huge, like, plus for the team in terms of like net rating. So
Yeah.
there is, like, he does bring value to the team just in certain situations.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Flynn talk?
Yeah.
No?
We
Okay.
can.
We don't have to.
No, like you highlighted a comment that was like, how come Gary is never talked about? Malachi is also rarely talked about.
Yeah.
It's like, on one hand, I think it is the media line of questioning. Like, we don't care about these guys as much as like we care about Pascal.
Yeah, that's true.
But the other part is that
They don't
come up. It does become obvious if you really pay attention to these pressers, like who the favorites are, and like who is on the front of Nurse's mind.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is Malachi or Gary.
Yeah,
personally.
The Malachi one makes sense. It's like you don't really want to talk about him too much because he's still, like, he has had confidence issues. He still is young. You don't really, as a coach, I don't think you really want to expose him overly much, right? Like, you just want to let him do his thing. Gary's a little bit more curious, I think. Like, you'd think someone like Gary, who did grow a lot last year, you'd think Nurse would be focused on, like, filling his boots.
Yeah, and the same with like the starting question. He could have said like, yeah, Gary.
Right.
Gary's starting.
I don't know. Like, is that a subconscious bias? Is that like it's just like coincidence that we're not? I don't know.
Look, I think, I wanted to bring up this quote from Fred too, which was basically like they asked him what the team needs to improve on this season, and he said like, I only think about the playoffs, and he said there were some coverages that we didn't execute in terms of the personnel we had out there. That can mean a lot of different things. I think it definitely means the way they defended Embiid. They only did it well in like 2 games.
Fred's calling out Masai.
No, I think in terms of the personnel, I'm not saying Fred is saying this. I'm saying this, but like the way that Gary was picked on in that series, he is not the type of player that like this team lusts over, pretty obviously, just in terms of size and two-way ability and all that stuff. So
and like single dimensionality on the offensive end.
Yes, exactly. So if he wants to be here long term, he's going to have to improve as a passer and as a defender. And that's why I think this trade deadline is going to be fascinating. I think everyone assumes the Raptors are pretty, Masai talks a big game, like we're going to grow together as a program. We're young. However, Gary is on the final year of a contract.
Well, he's a player option this year,
right? Right. Let's assume it's the final year because the money is going up and like he has every reason to decline it and sign a new deal.
Yeah.
Do you see them like shopping him at the deadline? Say they're like in 5th place in the East, same place they were last year. Do you see do you see a potential looking for a better fit like we just talked about around Pascal?
I don't think Toronto is going to trade somebody because they're worried about losing them for nothing in the offseason. Like,
they should.
I mean, they did it with Kyle.
That's true.
So, like, there are ways to work around it.
No, that's a good point. Sign and trades have become increasingly popular.
And I think if they're competitive and there's not an obvious, like, the problem, like, the thing with Norman was that, like, Norman was older. I think there was probably less, like, interest in him, especially, like, because he was going to be, I don't know. I think there was less interested in Norm. I think they traded him because they didn't think they were losing that much, I guess, with getting Gary in return. I don't know. I
think Norm had his chances, his fair share of chances to improve.
But why did they trade him at the deadline and not hold on to him?
Well, that's actually the difference between a Kyle and a JTJ. Like, there's different levels of like desire around the league and stuff where I think like you're gonna have more of a market with a guy like Kyle Lowry. You saw Dallas empty their
New Orleans too.
Money, yeah, New Orleans like clear out money for Kyle Lowry. I don't think teams are as desperate to get Gary in there, so it might be harder to do an off-season.
True, but I guess my point was just that like I think they're willing to figure that out in the summertime and like get something for him in a sign and trade, and then because if they're going to compete, and they're going to need him if they want to compete, unless they can actually upgrade off of him in the moment, and then if you can, you might be paying more to do that than they're willing to do, right? Like they might be more in a selling mode with Gary in the summertime than in a buying mode at the trade deadline, if that makes sense.
It does, but I wonder if we were just talking about the fit around Pascal, and we're talking about touches on the offensive end. Gary is a guy who needs the ball in his hand. Like, he is a great catch and shoot guy, but he's not. That's not been his game in the NBA, and he's not a great defender. So I wonder if you trade Gary for a more prototypical 3-and-D guy.
I don't. But the thing is, okay, so like imagine you trade Gary for like KCP and like a second round pick or something, right? It's
No,
like
you gotta go for more upside than that. Well, I was actually thinking like Michael Porter Jr. Not that I.
That's not a traditional 3-and-D.
Not the D, but the 3.
I mean,
would offensively, I like the fit.
Well, everybody would like the fit with him offensively, but I think if you're talking 3-and-D, like,
but he's bigger at least. He's not going to get picked on in the same way that Gary did.
KCP, look, okay, find me somebody that you're talking about.
KCP is just like not a high enough level thing that I would want to. The talent.
Well, you get picks or something, right? Like the idea is you're losing Gary.
Yeah.
Anyway, assuming it's something like that, I think this team is in a world of trouble because, like, we get shooting, but now we have nobody who can create in the offense. And we talked about this yesterday, like, and I wrote about this the other day, like, Gary is a horrible passer. He's actually one of the worst assist percentage guys in the league, just straight up, for the amount of usage he gets. But he's one of our best creation scorers that we have.
He is.
And like until you can tell me that there's somebody stepping into that role, and it might be Scotty this year, it might be Freddie now.
I think it's OG too.
It could be.
I think it's a bit of Precious.
And so like it'll remain to be seen. But as of right now, he's number 2 in creation behind Pascal. Really,
he is. But it's a chicken and the egg scenario where if you trade JTJ, you're probably taking a step back right now. But you're giving these other guys room to grow into those roles offensively. And
well, that's why you bring them off the bench.
Yeah.
I guess.
That's true.
That is because I agree with you.
That's true.
But I don't know that you need to trade him without someone else proving that they're going to step into what we're missing. Because Gary's skill set is quite elite now.
Or at least elite on this team.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at least what he's demonstrated the latter part of last year, like. He had multiple, what was it, like 6 games in a row with 30 points or something? There's a few guys in the league that can legitimately do that. So
yeah, and I'm also not even saying to trade him necessarily. I want to just see a step this year because, like, he was injured or sick in those playoffs, so it's not completely fair to pick on him. True. But, like, I want to see, did he get stronger? Is he better able to guard those kind of players? And is his playmaking taking a step? Because if he is the exact same player, I do not see him or that same player fitting on the championship version of this Raptors. Like, I just don't see it. But hey, that's just me.
Yeah. I think his defense can get better just by virtue of him not being so hyper aggressive as he was. Like, I think he can get smarter positionally, and that will make him less of a liability.
Yeah, but still, the on-ball defense is...
Like, he should be able to guard Harden-ish.
Harden's a tough guard. I'm not going to lie. Like,
yeah, totally.
It's not a fair guy to be like, you should...
But I'm saying you should be able to put him in front of him and at least, like we got just ravaged with those 2 guys. Like, we couldn't...
And Gary was also the guy who... It's a Norman Powell situation, too. Mm-hmm. He was the guy who messed up the switch on the Embiid fadeaway 3 that won them game 3, and that was the series. And that was ultimately Gary just being a step slow defensively. And even if strength comes along, sometimes, aka Norman Powell, the IQ does not come along that you want.
Powell, I'm not going to speak that ill of Powell, but he did have kind of like a space outy thing going on. I don't think Gary has that. I think it's just like Gary's 23. You know, like he just doesn't have
the experience.
last year he was like, I'm proving myself as a defender, and I respect that. Like he really did embrace that part of his game. And like for a while there, him and Fred were terrorizing teams with the deflections and steals and everything. And so now, like I think his natural evolution as he becomes more comfortable in his role and gets more experience and like learns from like his peers and the coaches, like I think he's going to become a better defensive player just with that like experience. This is really his first year as an actual starter. It was his first year as a starter
last year. Yeah, lastly on Gary, just this point, I forgot to mention, I want to see him take those lanes to the basket because he often has a lane created by a screen or whatever it is, and then he just pulls up. And I want to see him actually get to the rim because Lord knows the Raptors need it. Yeah. Do you want to talk about Jeff Dowtin?
Oh,
I wasn't watching. So
they were playing music real loud in the gym, and I couldn't hear most of what Freddie was saying, so I just zoned out. And first of all, Dowtin was running pick and rolls with Boucher for quite a while, which it was kind of fun. And on the pick and rolls, Boucher was doing a little like dribble combo, doing his own thing. So that was nice to see. And then Dowtin was just shooting afterwards and zipping everything. And like Samson was saying in his preview with like training camp, like, I mean, it goes without saying that if one of these guys is gonna make the roster, they have to prove that they're a consistent 3-point shooter. And Dowtin's like weakness right now, I'd say, is his frame and his inconsistency from three. So it was just nice to see. Like I think he probably hit 14 of like 18 or something that I saw. So that was cool.
Yeah.
And I don't know who this big white old dude is one of the coaches. Maybe he's a shooting coach. I've never seen him before. But he's bellowing. Bellowing after every shot. Let's go. Let's fucking. Like, I think that was pretty great.
Yeah. TSN.ca speculation. Masai got mad at TSN.ca for the report that the Raptors are keeping a close eye on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Do you want to explain what that is about?
I don't want to get too into it, but just basically, basically a quote was taken out of context, and the context was that, you know, if you go for a guy like Durant or Donovan Mitchell, you lose out on your opportunity in the future to go out on
to monitor.
No, to put all your picks in for a star player, and Josh Lewenberg at TSN wrote that, you know, SGA is a guy who the Raptors are monitoring in a situation like that, and his quote got taken out of context, and we were just having fun because Masai had a comment or two
to Josh
about it. Yeah,
but the thing is that like, I mean, it's aggregators. We don't have to even talk about aggregators. Who cares? But like, we were saying, like, I don't really get why Masai would be upset. It's like, everybody's monitoring everybody. Like, I would expect Bobby and Masai to be monitoring like what DeAndre Jordan's up to. Not because I think they're like trying to acquire DeAndre Jordan, but like their job in this league is to know exactly where every player is at and what they're up to. Like that's because you're trying to find arbitrage, you're trying to find leverage wherever you can find it.
No, you're right.
Everybody's monitoring SGA.
But that's actually probably a tell in the sense that, like, for most players, he probably wouldn't get mad, but he probably actually wants SGA.
Well, that's ironic too. Then,
so it's kind of like a tell on yourself where it's like, don't put that out there.
Don't get
upset. Of course, I want him, but
play it cool.
Yeah, play it cool. Yeah. I don't want to be in the news for it.
And also, I mean, last point, like, I think, like, we all know what aggregators do now, right? So, like, for it to get out there, it's like we should all know better than to. Hold on, I got Goose over here honking. But yeah, anyway, it was pretty hot on Twitter today, but it's just kind of funny.
You want to get to questions, or do you have anything else?
Yeah.
You started some.
I started some questions.
Koloko talk, we kind of did, right?
We have none.
Did you guys see Koloko? I feel like we answered a lot of these questions now.
Who would you use when he's resting?
I said OG yesterday.
What's your sub pattern? That's kind of the same question, is it?
No, I think that's actually a good question in terms of like which of the big what do we want to call it? A big five? Big four? Which of the big four would you stagger and pair? Yeah.
I was trying to think about this when I was suggesting Gary come off the bench.
Lewis has written about this for Sportsnet. Like, it changes every year. Which matchups work and which don't. Last year they did Fred and Pascal quite a bit, which obviously worked really well. And then the other units didn't work as well. But that's kind of bold to keep your two best players together. I would, I guess, just based on what Nick was saying about valuing the on-ball defense and the pick and roll, I would separate Fred and OG.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then I guess you're doing OG with Pascal and Fred with Scotty. Or the opposite.
Well,
no, I think Pascal and Scotty are really good. Fred
Yeah.
and OG. That's how I would do it.
Well,
Fred and OG.
are you leaving 2 on, or because there's 4 coming on?
What do you mean? There's 4 coming on?
Well, there's Gary, Precious, Otto, and
let's
Boucher
leave Gary out of this.
off the bench.
No, I'm just saying, like, for the big 4, obviously there's going to be guys playing with them. But in terms of the big 4, how would you stagger the big 4?
But yeah, well, that's what I was saying. Is that I feel like I would leave Scotty on.
Mm-hmm.
Let Gary and the other 3 guys come on. So now you have Scotty, Gary, Boucher, Precious, Porter.
Yeah.
And then
just that's a 1 starter lineup. That's not going to play big minutes, I feel like.
Well, if you have Gary, you essentially have 2 starters.
Sorry, I keep disrespecting you.
Yeah, I mean, even though Nurse isn't going to talk about Gary, we're going to talk about Gary.
He is a starter. You're right.
And then you bring those other 3 on together. OG, Freddie.
I don't think those guys can survive long. Like, I get what you're saying, and that can work in spurts. But 1 starter and it being 2 starters and it being the worst 2, I don't think can survive big minutes.
What? Scotty's the worst.
Scotty and Gary. Yeah, I think OG's better than Scotty right now.
Yeah. Okay.
I've said that.
Yeah,
it's up for debate. They're close for sure, but
I just think, yeah,
I would do Fred and OG and Pascal and Scotty in terms of like breaking up the big 4.
No, not Fred and OG.
Why not?
Because you just said you want to split up OG and
Fred
at 1 point.
So what did I just say? Oh yeah, so
Fred and Pascal or Fred and Scotty?
Fred and Pascal or Fred and Scotty. Yeah, this is tough.
I know.
It's tough.
We don't have an answer. We'll come back to that one.
Yeah.
We have tomorrow.
Do you see Scotty and Fred starting at any time? Okay.
Thoughts on Otto's?
I don't know.
I think Otto's going to play a very similar role that he played in Golden State. Like, he's going to be that 7th, 8th guy. There's going to be times where, like, if we're playing a smaller team, he might start if we just want extra shooting. Like they did with him, I think, in the finals against Boston. They started him.
Yeah.
So, or Dallas maybe. So, like, they're, I think his ideal fit is like 15 to 17 minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe a game. And shooting 8 threes.
Yeah, he's not going to have the ball in his hand. Like, I just think he's going to be a spot-up guy. He's going to be a cutter, and he's going to be a rebounder.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
He'll, like, guard, like, the 3rd best guy opposing him, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to see how him and Thad play together because, like, we talked about Precious and Boucher being pretty good switchable guys. Otto and Thad, probably not quite as good, just in terms of the lateral movement.
No.
So can they switch everything in those lineups? Like, I'll be curious to see if that works.
Again, this is why I want Thad to start. I think Thad and Otto is like, you're getting a little slow.
Yeah, together, yeah. No, I kind of agree. It's not their identity to be that slow and that, like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. That's a good question, but I think the nice thing about Otto is the versatility. Yeah, and you could put him in place of Gary. You get a little bit bigger on the starting lineup, but I just think that there's
a lot of talent and some speed.
Yeah, and I think, like, if you're gonna bring Gary off the bench, it'd be nice to have some other shooters around with him. Like you want as much offense around Gary as you can, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, well, I think that's pretty good. 45 minutes. I didn't see any other questions that we didn't get to.
Do you work for the Raptors?
No.
Is there a bench mob this season? I think that's kind of what I was getting at with Scotty as the one guy.
Yeah, that's fair. Scotty and Gary, kind of. So it's not really a bench mob because there's 2 starters.
No, Gary's coming off the bench.
Oh, right. In our world.
Okay. Yeah, that's it for us. I think we're running out of steam. Thanks for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow later. The media time is at 3 Pacific, so 6 Eastern. So we'll probably be on
7.
We might not even be on because there's a shindig afterwards.
Yeah,
we'll try and be
like
on.
An hour. Or
we'll
2
tweet. We'll tweet if we're on.
I think we should be. There's like a couple hours in between.
Yeah. Okay. So tweet at any one of us if you like have things we want to maybe bring up. I don't know, at the media session, right? Like we have our own questions we want to ask, but if we can tie in with curiosities you have, we could.
Or just like
I'm not guaranteeing it.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to ask questions that people ask for, but
I mean,
I'll look around if people
exactly
are wondering like how tall is this person?
True.
Shit like that.
Yeah, that's true too.
Swore. All right.
I said asshole.
Okay.
All right.
Explicit.
That's it for us. Thanks for tuning in. Keep an eye out for our stuff. Peace.